The opening plenary session set the scene for the whole conference, with two very prominent architects presenting on urban issues in both the local and international context. Mr. Charles Correa spoke passionately about the unique challenges that Mumbai faces, especially in terms of density and lack of facilities, while Mr. David Nelson from Foster and Partners presented on some of the best practice urban case studies such as the Masdar Eco-City Master Plan in Abu Dhabi.
If we look at the amenities per person, and these are the amenities recommended by our government and by our authorities. The schools and hospitals should be about 6 meters per square meters per person. This has been lowered recently to 6 meters. It was higher, but this is what's been used in the Delhi Master Plan. Green areas should be about 4 acres per thousand. This is the standard right across, I think, in most places, which comes to about 16 meters per person. If you add that up, it comes to 22 meters. Now, that's quite a large number, and we can say that we could have about 10 meters within easy reach, and another 12 meters might take place elsewhere, like Borivali National Park or the Bois de Boulogne or the Kew Garden in London. It's there, but it's not right in your neighborhood. But at least 10 out of 22 have to be within your neighborhood or nearby. So, now to this must be added the built-up space which the apartment needs. Supposing we take a middle-class apartment in Bombay, the average would be 500 square feet. I'm not talking about low income. It would come to about 10 square meters per person. So here we have 10 square meters in the building, and then we've got 10 square meters of open space. And together that comes to 20 meters, and that means an average of 20. Now, if I add another floor, the footprint of the building stays the same, but the amenities go up to 20 and the average comes to 15. You can understand, yes. And then when I go to the next one, it goes to 5 floors, let's say. I would then have 10 again, and then 15, and then 50, and then you get 12. So we're beginning to save on land, but it's beginning to taper off. When I go to 10 floors, I've come down to 11 meters. And then after that, it goes pretty flat all the way up to 20 floors and then to 40 floors. So this idea that I'm saving land only works when I'm looking at the building footprint, not when I look at the other infrastructure needed, which is, I think, what Anthony Wood was referring to. It's not just water supply, it's also amenities, it's also open area. Now, you can see there the two things I mentioned, that at 11 meters, it's a little, about 10.5, it flattens out, and it doesn't matter how high you go after that. If you give the amenities, you're not going to put more people in that area. The only way to get more people in, which is the way we do it, is that we don't give them the amenities. We just pack the whole place with buildings. The other thing you notice here is that at 10 stories, it begins to flatten out. Beyond that, you're not gaining for this particular area of apartment. Now, the other thing I would like to point out, that the amount of amenities is directly proportional to the number of persons. It is not 15% as stipulated by the municipality. That's a ridiculous rule, and it worked when we had 2-story and 3-story development across Indian cities. Today, people build 20 stories and then they put 15% for the open area. That's ridiculous. In any country, in any city around the world, it's directed to the number of people, the density you're creating. And we could do that here. So to say that you give me more FAR and I'll house more people is too simplistic, actually. I know the intentions are good, but if you look at this, you realize it's not going to happen unless you condemn them to a life of deprivation for the next 50 years, the next 100 years, as long as these buildings last. That's the kind of city Bombay will become. Now, these calculations were for middle income units. If I go to the units for what is called economically weaker sections, EWS by the government, which is 25 meters per family, which is 5 meters per head, the numbers actually, there they start they start flattening out much, much earlier. And so at about 5 stories, I really don't get more density. If I go in for the luxury flats, now here it makes sense. You start at 40 meters in a flat of 200 meters. That's 2,000 square feet, which is a typical Nepean Sea Road flat, Malabar Hill flat, and a luxury apartment. But even that flattens out to at about 20 stories. And you don't really gain. But interestingly, it flattens out at the same number, which is what you chose for amenities. So what you choose for amenities is the crucial issue, how much that should be. Now, so the key thing is not it's not how high we can build, but it's got to do with the amenities we provide. So can we cut down on schools? Maybe we could, but this is a problem for educators. Can we cut down on hospitals, or can we use hospitals more efficiently? Again, this is a problem for hospital administrators and doctors, and we should have conferences about that. It's crucial. For instance, if you could stop playing cricket and start playing squash, or stop playing squash and start playing carom, or whatever, just run in a single place, maybe you'd get much more. You have to think of that. Can you use schools 2 or 3 times over? But just thinking, unless you look at the amenities, you are not actually looking at housing. You're just looking at piling rooms one over the other. So this thing which I showed you at the beginning is the key to it. And I would really hope that during these 3 days, even if you don't discuss this, you set up, CTUB should set up another conference which asks these people to come in, and who knows what inventive ideas could come out of really playing fields that could be stacked, for instance, in some way, multi-level. Who knows? We don't know. We've never tried it. But this is actually where you would get higher density. Now, I'll tell you what actually happens nowadays. I mean, what is happening to our city. If this is a typical area of the city, and then we add 3 buildings, there they go. And then, of course, with those 3 buildings comes the amenity space which should have been provided. And instead, of course, and that isn't the responsibility of the developers. That is the responsibility of the authorities. They should not give permission unless they know that space has been guaranteed. But instead of which, after the buildings are built, the rest of the space is then filled up with more buildings. That's the way Bombay is developing. So it seems to me that because of this, because of the crucial importance of amenities in residential areas, in most cities around the world, the high-rise buildings are in the offices. This is true of Australia, it's true of America. I think it's, except for European cities where the people continue to live in the center of the city, which I will show you. Whereas in these cities, the high-rise buildings are in offices and the families continue to live in low-rise and medium-rise housing. And I'll end with this slide of Paris, which is illustrating so many of the things I'm trying to say for residential areas. I don't have to spell this out to you. You can look at it and you can see that there's an organic relationship between the buildings and the people and the sidewalks and the trees and the traffic and the parks. It's exactly the kind of thing you need for housing. It's not just isolated buildings climbing up. No, and it's very high density. I would guess this is the same density as you get in Singapore. In fact, I know it is. It's even higher. Most European cities, and I think I'll be borne out by this. It's just that the image is of 6 stories, and we assume that's not high density. It's actually very intense use of land. So I think I would end by saying that, first of all, I agree with Anthony. I want development, and I want intense and intensive use of land. But it's not just a simplistic thing of saying, let's build higher. I think cities and their buildings are an intricate mix of conflicting entities. To build sustainable cities, and that's a very important word, if you really mean that word in this conference, to build sustainable cities, we must understand this and optimize all the parameters and not just one. And in this process, I think we will not only have to increase the infrastructure, I agree, but I think we should differentiate in the DC rules and the development control rules between what is applicable to office buildings and what are the requirements and what is applicable to residential buildings. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of being able to be here and to talk to you. Every now and then there's an opportunity that can focus thoughts about how we should bring together our cities. But it's very important that when we do so, we do focus onto the context in which they're located. And we're very privileged, and many of us, in fact, probably a lot of people in this room, are working on this project in Masdar. I'm here merely as an ambassador for it. A lot of things I'm going to say and put forward really are the work of a lot of people, all focused with the intention of considering sustainable city design in this rather hostile environment of the desert here in Abu Dhabi. And obviously, it's quite interesting to sort of think about the fact that air conditioning, the space that we're in, has really only existed probably in a really intensive way for about 60 years or so, maybe after World War II. The distribution around the world has given us this way of thinking. We can create space such as this and cool it. And if you go back before that influx of air conditioning, you realize there are thousands and thousands of years of development of people in different climates around the world have actually been very ingenious about thinking about how to mitigate the conditions that they find themselves in. So when we started to consider the master plan for Masdar, we really wanted to try and understand exactly how, by using design in the way that traditional cities had evolved in this kind of climate, how they really work with, or what could we do? Can we use some of those spaces, and can we create a different attitude towards their sort of thermal performance in particular? And you can see through here from the open desert, these are felt temperatures, what it actually feels like to be in the space. And you can cause considerable drops literally by configuring buildings and spaces. And it's very good to go and study these locations, to actually physically be there and think about the dimensions. You see the buildings are very close together. It's something that design in the world, probably since the fire of London, has been fighting against. Everything should be opened up. Sure, it should be in northern European locations, but in here, where the sun is so intense, the idea of bringing these walls together from a temperature point of view and also to control the light is something that we tried to embody within the thinking of the plan. Masdar really is, in one level, a kind of artificial situation. It's the plot of land that was available, big-scale plot of land, and it was focusing on what would we put there, what quantum of people and activity would we locate on this piece of land, and also allow area around it to help balance that CO2 equation that's very, very important. You can see here the density is very high, and just in comparison with Venice there, you can feel, the grain and the way it actually hangs together. And in designing somewhere from scratch, obviously thinking about the orientation of the city, where the best position is for sun and for light and for air movement, really evolved into this grid pattern, this sort of off north-south orientation to achieve that balance. It has something like about 90,000 people in its fully developed state who will be living and working on that site. And actually it's very important that the uses and the activities in some way emulate the richness of an evolved city. So the uses are not zoned out into particular areas, they're mixed up and integrated together, whether that's industry or office space or where you live. Everything in here should be a 24-hour operation. It should give the life and the kind of excitement of being in a place if it's to be a success. This is the master plan in a fully developed form, and you can see the areas around it which are going to be used as part of the development of the university. At the heart of the building here is a university, and this is the way that some of the architecture, very much of today, is trying to actually bring together some of those parameters of building close, letting light in, letting it come down through into the spaces. Industry, very flexible zones there. As we start on this exercise, we don't know what the industry is going to end up being, so the production space is also very important. And open areas. It's not all literally in those narrow streets. The plan opens up to let airflow come through the city and by creating green spaces. And you can see the construction here moving forward now on that first phase. The university is a tremendous engine. Within the city, that red block is the first phase, and it is the institute. It actually can create startup companies and businesses. If its whole curriculum is focused on sustainable strategies, then really it has an opportunity to produce something very, very interesting. And it's very consciously being used as an engine for the development of this location. New location is already under construction. All of the piles are in for construction to develop. And really, we hope the lessons that are learned from this through time, and it will be a long time as this evolves, if something becomes the real legacy of what Masdar is all about. And that hopefully will be used and be relevant in part to other projects around the world. Thank you very much.
In a city like Bombay, if we are doing a cluster redevelopment, as you are planning a prototype in South Bombay, how can we take care of number of people who have their stakes and different titles in the land? Like there are pagri tenants, there are landlords, there are developers, there are societies, and how can we take care of individual interest as well as the collective interest of all? And how can we bring all the minds together? That is the major problem in cluster redevelopment. Other than that, everything is possible.
Again, I think this is called, it's called land assemblage, where you try and get the piece of land and combine them. I'm not an expert in that, but there are many lawyers, especially elsewhere in the world, who have been great experience in this. There are many, many models. The models we follow is the old government model that you just grab the land and pay nothing for it. And it's called, and it doesn't work. And I think New Bombay was held up for 10 years because of that bloody-minded attitude. You know, on the other hand, there are ways at the other extreme where all the players would be assigned, a portion of equity. Like you'd say your company is there and 70% of the equity belongs to the people who are taking the risk. 30% is then, I'm just making this up because I'm not a land lawyer at all, would be then distributed among the owners in a way that they all agree is safe. So they also take a risk. But for them it would be a very small risk. They're going to probably make a profit anyway. But they come along with you as opposed to being on the other side of the table. And I think there are many models for this. In fact, I think they exist certainly in Europe and America, and I think South America too. And we should look into that. But this idea of trying to get it all in your pocket means that you don't have anyone else on your side. And I think we should look at land assemblage, it's called. I would think that's the way to do it.